Well, let's talk about the latest on EVs because EV charging stations are in high demand and the industry is racing to keep up. The number of charging ports in the national station locator was 3.2% in the first quarter, and that's expected to continue to climb. But range anxiety is still prevalent amid fear that the charging infrastructure is far short of what's necessary for wider EV adoption. Here to talk about that, we want to bring in Brendan Jones, Blink Charging CEO, as well as Joel Levin, Plug-in America Executive Director. Great to have you both here with us today. Joel, let me start with you. Plug-in America, for those who aren't familiar, it's a nonprofit that promotes the use of EVs. I'm curious from your perspective, how would you describe the current state of the charging network here in the U.S.?
Well, it's a mix. Most people charge at home and they use the charging network mainly for longer trips. The public charging network, EV drivers are not very happy with it. We did a survey this year that showed that drivers are generally dissatisfied with the public charging network. The Tesla network, on the other hand, where about half of EV drivers drive Teslas, people are pretty happy with the Tesla network. So it's sort of a mixture of the two. The federal government is in the process of rolling out their NEVI program that would create charging along major highways along the whole U.S. And the standards for NEVI are pretty robust. And so if they're able to implement that program as it's designed, we think that public charging should improve a lot over the next couple of years.
Brendan, how significant is it that you have more auto manufacturers that are deciding, okay, we can all kind of use Tesla as a standard here, and what does that mean for adoption, especially when you think about the network that we have right now and vehicle owners just trying to make sure that they're going to have the ability to charge anywhere they need to, regardless of what type of plug that they've got?
Yeah, it's really not a very relevant statistic. And what we mean by that is the EV industry globally has structurally adjusted. In the US, Tesla is a bit of a phenomenon in terms of the charging network, but in Europe, the Tesla standard is banned. So what that means is the folks that develop cables and connectors, they've matured independently. And it's not a big issue to put a NACS, as what Tesla calls that standard, cable and connector onto a charger. We've done it successfully. That version of a charger for Blink goes into production in November and December this year. So that's not really a big issue. And what we really need to focus on is what the charging world demands. And according to McKinsey, according to Price Cooper's Waterhouse, Bloomberg, and a multiplicity of other surveys, the dominant amount of charging takes place on L2 charging, 90+%. And this statistic has not waned over the last 15 years since I've been doing this. So we expect that. When we talk about DC fast charging, that's for those exceptional trips. That's for when you're going on the quarter, you're going to grandma's house, and that represents 90% or less. So we have two things that are challenging us. First, we have to say that the standards issue is not a big deal. The industry will take care of that. And secondarily, that we have to break the dominant paradigm of charging and saying you don't have to go to a depot or fueling station. You can charge at work, you can charge at home, you can charge at your doctor's office or the grocery store.
Brendan, how confident then are you that the infrastructure can keep up with EV adoption? When we talk about what this is going to look like 5-10 years from now, what do you think the charging networks could potentially look like?
Yeah, so if we look at what we need, and this is at 35% penetration by 2030, right? So California is actually at 23% EV penetration. We need about 30 million chargers out there in both private and public. The split's about 28 million of those need to be in private situations, that's multifamily dwelling, private garages, in-home. And then the other remaining percent is public. So we have now developed throughout this entire industry the capacity to produce those chargers. If you look at some of the DOE data and the loans they've given for charging manufacturing companies relocating in the United States, it's simply outstanding numbers. Blink has just brought online a new facility in Maryland that will soon to be announced, but ups our capacity on L2 exclusively in the US to up to 50,000 units per year. And we're going to see that even double over the next 3 and 4 years. So we're going to meet the challenge of capacity, but to the other point, we're also simultaneously doubling down on quality. there's no question that some of the legacy chargers that were put out over the last 10 to 15 years need to be relooked at. Some need to be ripped out, and the quality needs to improve. But really, we need to focus on breaking this assumption that you have to go to a gas station to fuel. You don't. You go home to fuel. And the reliability on those chargers is really, really good.
Joel, what is the next step that you would like to see from the federal government in terms of prioritizing the network and making sure that there is more access for drivers?
Right. I think I would say two things. Number one is the consumer experience. So not just focusing on building out the network, but that the consumer experience is really positive. So when you look at, let's say, the gas station experience, not that we're big advocates of buying gasoline, but the gas station experience, when a consumer goes there, it's a pretty reliable, consistent experience. The pumps always work. They always take a credit card. The price is posted. It's well lit. It's covered. It's a pretty positive experience. I'd like to see the charging experience be at least that good when you go to a public charging station. So that's number one, is that the consumer experience is positive and easy for EV drivers. And then second, I think we need to really focus on the challenge for people who live in apartments. So Brendan's absolutely right. The bulk of people charge at home, and the home charging experience is pretty good and pretty easy. I charge in my own driveway, and it's very simple and straightforward. But if you live in an apartment, it's not. And so I think there needs to be more energy put into addressing the issue for apartment dwellers. And it's not a simple problem. It's probably the single most challenging problem we have in the EV space. And it's going to be a mixture of doing retrofits on older buildings, getting building codes in place for construction of newer buildings, creating more public charging that's close to where people live, and some DC fast charging, and then also charging at work. A lot of times for people who can't charge at home, charging at work can be a great option as well. So there's kind of a whole range of solutions, but definitely for the roughly half of Americans who live in apartments, charging is more challenging than for people who live in a single family house.
Just want to end on a prediction here from both of you. And Joel, I'll go to you first since you ended on the thought there. When do you believe that we could potentially start to scratch the surface of not just widespread EV adoption, but really see this in critical mass, among the American public?
Well, I would say that it's happening now, and it's happening really rapidly. It's going to be in different places at different times. So, for example, in larger urban areas, there's a lot of EVs out there, and it's growing very rapidly. In rural areas, it's harder because historically the cars that people want to drive have not been electric up until now, but that's changing very quickly as we're getting more pickups and larger EVs out there. So I would say that it depends where you live, but in larger areas,
Sure.
it's happening right now very quickly.
And Brendan, very quickly, the same question to you. With this added note of, one of the other major players in this charge point just had to raise $232 million in order to support their path to profitability. How much more liquidity needs to be injected into companies as well that are bringing this to life in order to be profitable in this endeavor?
So, on the last question there you asked, there's no question that we need to create sustainable business models. And at Blink, we're working towards that right now. We have a EBITDA positive number we put out there by December 2024. So we have to create sustainable companies, and Blink is working to that. Others in the industry are working on that. But you do need that investment dollar today, those capital dollars, to make the future of tomorrow come true. But to the other question, we're seeing the growth, right? It's just now we have to do that growth at a profitable level. We have to focus on business fundamentals and make sure we're making the right type of investments to create sustainable charging infrastructure from the US and into Europe. But the numbers are very positive. As we referenced earlier in this call, with 22% plus in growing sales in California, which is the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world, that's a strong indicator where it's going. Now, Blink has the advantage. We have 3 business units in Europe. And we're already much higher than that at the penetration rate in some of the companies we operate. So we look at Europe and we have some predictability on what's going to happen in the U.S., especially in the major metros, as was just referenced. That's where the growth, but the trickle-down effect is starting to happen. And then look towards the OEMs. And when I started this, we were selling Nissan Leafs, and that was a subcompact car. Now we've got a car and a vehicle for every segment with a multiplicity of offerings, with ranges up to 400 and 450 miles. We've taken range anxiety out by building new charging infrastructures, and we're going to continue to do that. So we say the future is very, very bright. We need investments, but we also need to work on the fundamentals of sustainability and profitability for all the companies, Blink included.
All right, gentlemen, thanks so much for taking the time here today. Brendan Jones, Blink Charging CEO and President, and Joel Levin, who is the Plug in America Executive Director, joining us here. Thanks so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thanks.